You've been breaking yourself the wrong way. How often do you do this? Every time you push through exhaustion, ignore what your body tells you. Force another hour of focus when your mind's already gone. You think you're building discipline. You think this is what strength looks like. But there's a Japanese concept that reveals something most people never understand about breaking points. And once you see it, you'll realize why your hardest efforts sometimes produce your weakest results. The method is called Kanzo. But before I explain what it actually means, you need to understand what's really happening when you break. You already know that feeling. You've hit it. That moment when you've been grinding so hard that you can't think straight anymore. When discipline stops working. When the system you built just stops. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. The problem isn't that you broke. The problem is you don't know how to break correctly. Aurelius used to say something that confused me for years. He'd watch younger philosophers exhaust themselves in study, in practice, in constant self-improvement, and he'd tell them, "You're building a structure with no space to breathe. When pressure comes, it won't bend. It will shatter." I didn't understand that, because everything we're taught about discipline, about growth, about becoming better, it's all about addition. Add more habits, add more structure, add more control. Stack routine on top of routine until your day is a fortress of productivity. But here's what's actually happening. Every addition creates brittleness. Every new habit you force into place is another rigid beam in a structure that can't flex. And when life applies pressure, when chaos inevitably comes, rigid things don't survive. They snap, they fracture at the joints you thought were strongest. This is what Kanzo actually addresses. It's usually translated as simplicity or elimination of clutter. But the deeper meaning is about strategic reduction, about knowing what to remove, so that what remains can actually bear weight. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why your discipline keeps failing at the worst moments and the one counterintuitive action that makes you unbreakable instead. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Kale Torvin spent 3 years building what he thought was an unbreakable routine. Morning meditation at 5, cold shower, 2 hours of focused work before dawn, strict meal timing, evening training, journaling, sleep at 9, every single day, no exceptions. He told himself this was discipline. This was control. And for 3 years, it worked. He felt powerful, efficient, like he'd solved the problem of being human. Then his father got sick, and everything that made him strong made him weak. Because you can't schedule grief. You can't meal prep your way through a crisis. When he had to drive 4 hours to the hospital at 3 in the morning, when he had to sit in waiting rooms with no gym nearby, when sleep became something that happened in chairs, his entire system collapsed. Not just the routine. Him, the person he'd built himself into, had no capacity to bend. I watched him during those weeks. That angular jaw, always set with such certainty, just slack, lost. And he said something I'll never forget. "I built myself into someone who only works under perfect conditions. I optimized myself into fragility." This is the thing Marcus Aurelius understood that most people miss. He didn't write the Meditations as a productivity system. He wrote it in a military tent, during a plague, while running an empire that was falling apart. The whole point was, how do you remain yourself when everything external breaks down? And his answer wasn't more discipline. It was radical simplification. He kept asking, what's essential? Not what's optimal. Not what's impressive. What can I absolutely not lose and still be myself? Kale started asking that question in the hospital. At first, his list was long. He needed his routine, his gym, his supplements, his tracking systems, And then he'd look at his father, unconscious, breathing through a tube, and the list got shorter. What's essential? Not the cold shower. Not the perfectly timed meals. Not the 2-hour deep work blocks. What remained when everything else was stripped away? For him, it came down to 3 things. Breathing with intention, even if just for 60 seconds, moving his body in whatever way the moment allowed. And one question before sleep. Did I show up as myself today, or as my fear? That's Kanzo, not minimalism as aesthetic. Reduction as revelation, stripping away everything that makes you dependent on conditions, until what's left is something that works in any condition. Seneca called it the practiced poverty drill. Once a month, he'd live like he'd lost everything, sleep on the floor, eat plain food, wear simple clothes. And he'd ask himself, is this really so bad? Is this what I've been afraid of? Because the fear isn't losing comfort. The fear is discovering you can't function without it, that you've built an impressive life that only works when nothing goes wrong. Kale rebuilt differently after that. Not routine first, essence first. He asked, what's the absolute minimum that keeps me centered? And he protected that minimum like it was sacred. Everything else became flexible, adaptive, optional. When his next crisis came, and it did, he didn't break, because there was nothing left to break. What remained was something that could bend, adjust, persist under any pressure. Something that didn't need external conditions to validate its existence. This is what breaking correctly means. You don't wait for life to strip you down. You strip yourself down first. You find out what you're actually made of when the conditions aren't perfect, when the routine fails, when the system stops working. Here's what you do tomorrow. Take your routine, your system, whatever structure you've built, and remove one thing. Not the easiest thing, something you think you need, something you believe you can't function without, and go through one full day without it. Just one. And watch what happens. Watch if you actually fall apart, or if something deeper takes over, something that doesn't need perfect conditions to exist. Do this once a week. Keep removing. Keep finding what remains. And eventually, you'll discover what Viridius Theron knew. Strength isn't what you can add to yourself. It's what you can remove and still stand. This is where most people stop. Don't be most people.